for all of the geohazards that occurs doon sa Taliptip, socio-economically, they feel that okay yung buhay nila doon. Ang parating nga nilang kataga ay madaling mangisda. Para sa kanila, madaling mangisda, yun yung buhay na alam nila, and therefore, ba't sila aalis?
Magandang araw mga kapwa-siyentista at welcome sa Behind the Science podcast kung saan kakausapin natin ang ating mga scientists para ibahagi hindi lang ang mga resulta ng pag-aaral nila kundi pati na rin ang mga behind the scenes or behind the science stories nito. Simula sa kung paano nila ito naisipan gawin hanggang sa na-publish na nila ito. Ang guest natin for today is a former University Research Associate ng UP Diliman National Institute of Geological Sciences. He also obtained his bachelor's degree in geology sa UP NIGS at ngayon ay graduate student or rather kumukuha ng MS Geology sa the same university and under the Engineering Geology Laboratory ni Dr. Sandra Catane, kung saan yung research niya ay nagfo-focus sa landslide geohazards. So without further ado, let's all welcome Mr. John Romel Flora.
Good day to everyone.
And actually, hindi pala magandang araw no kasi gabi natin. Gabi in-upload pala yung episode. So, magandang gabi sa lahat. So yung research focus niyo po ay landslide. Pero ngayon, ang pag-uusapan natin ay Manila Bay. So siguro, bago tayo pupunta doon, pag-usapan muna natin yung journey nyo as a scientist and paano napunta yung research nyo from landslide to Manila Bay. So, can you share with us, when did you realize na gusto nyo maging isang geologist or isang scientist?
Well, that was noong high school. Doon ako na-introduce, the concept of geology itself as a field na maaari mong pasukin. Pangunahin kong i-blame dyan is yung GeoQuiz na pinapatakbo ng UP GeoSoc. Isa ako doon sa mga contestants nila from my high school alma mater, which was Rizal National Science High School. So, bali 3 taon na akong pinadala doon nung school sa doon sa GeoQuiz year after year, which kung alam nyo kung kailan nagsimula yung GeoQuiz, that already gives an idea kung anong panahon yun nagsimula.
Can you share with us po ano yung nangyayari dito sa GeoQuiz? Ano yung mga activities, bakit nagustuhan nyo i-pursue yung geology? Aside sa 3 beses kayo pinadala.
That was the early portion ng GeoQuiz. So really, it was this quiz game show na hosted na UP GeoSoc, which is one of the student organizations sa loob ng University of the Philippines, Diliman, NIGS being the National Institute of Geological Sciences. It's a quiz show, a trivia show about about geology, geosciences na open sa high school students from different institutions. So, at least nung panahon na ako involved, it was there was a team of 4 members na, and then yung 4 members na yun, they would work together in order to answer as many questions as possible correctly, and then hopefully mag-progress sa final round and manalo. Kung mananalo, may prize, ganun. And then alongside that, syempre, is ini-introduce yung mga activities na ginagawa within the National Institute of Geological Sciences. And that was where nahupog yung idea that, geology might be something for me. I mean, syempre, you're studying rocks, you're studying minerals, you were studying yung ating mga natural landscapes, including yung mga volcanoes and mga mountain ranges dito sa Pilipinas, which is napakadami. Our country is dominated by that by yung mga mountain ranges, volcanoes natin, and the valleys in between said mountain ranges. And so at the time, that was when I thought that would be the place, that would be a more interesting field than, for example, pursuing physics or chemistry, because at the time both of those were more computational, more math, mas mabigat ang focus niya sa mathematics. And contrast that to geology, which was being introduced as both more of a hands-on science, but also naman siya. It's hands-on, but it also does have a bit of that computational component as well.
Nung time na yun, may chance ba kayo na mag-lab tour or field trip sa mga geological sites around Metro Manila, or purely quiz lang siya at that time?
First time was talagang quiz at the time, and then later on dinagdag yung lab tour. Nga currently yung mga mas recent na ganyan nila, yung mas recent na mga geo-quiz nila is, I think yun nagkakaroon na rin sila ng tour sa iba't ibang mga geological sites within the Metro Manila, or kahit within lang sa Diliman area. So nung panahon na yun, it was really the early days ng GeoQuiz. So mostly lab tours pa lang yung ginagawa nila dan, yung museum, the NIGS Museum, yun yung dun parating dinadala yung mga students back then.
From there, paano kayo nagkaroon ng interest sa sa landslide? Bakit nyo napili pag-aralan yung landslide?
It's a combination ng opportunities and that were available at the time, at saka na rin interests. So I was more interested kasi dun sa mga physical processes than geomorphology. So yung study ng landscape, so I've always been more interested in that compared to, say, yung yung geochemistry or geophysics, which is the study ng chemical reactions and interactions ng ating geological landscape, or yung interactions with geophysics, which is the interaction ng physical forces and fields doon sa ating geological landscape. And then around 2017 at the time naghahanap si Dr. Sandra Catane, who's my research supervisor. At the time, naghahanap siya ng URA, University Research Associate, and I took the job. And ang naging primary research focus at the time was landslides, and it was right up my alley, because it also intermarried it with another interest that I've always had, which is engineering. I've always had an interest in how things get built, essentially that civil engineering aspect of it. And kasi it's the interplay of yung geology, which I took for several years, and yung interest ko with that field ng civil engineering. Pinagsama mo yung dalawang yun, that's engineering geology. And amongst engineering geology, EGL, the Engineering Geology Laboratory sa UP NIGS, was focused on landslides. Hindi sila nagpo-focus masyado on other aspects ng engineering geology, which includes stuff like foundation works and yung interactions with hydrogeology, which is yung groundwater. So, mas nag-focus doon sa mga surface events, which is landslides. And from there, doon na-develop yung research interest sa landslides.
And then from landslide, bakit naman paano po kayo ngayon napunta doon sa research nyo on Manila Bay? Parang ang laki niyang jump na galing doon sa bundok, napunta na kayo doon sa dagat.
Yeah, that's admittedly a bit of a story kung paano siya nagsimula. It started in mga late 2018 na kung kailan in-approach yung lab, the EGL was in-approach ng isa sa mga members kasi ng EGL was Sir Rick Saturay, currently working sa Fisay Baguio, pero he's also like taking he's also taking data science sa UP right now. Siya nagpasimula nitong buong to eh. He was involved with a scientists organization AGHAM, which is essentially a scientist organization that advocates yung links na science to society. So yung mga scientific concepts is dinadala nila para makatulong sa mga members of society. And at the time, AGHAM was involved in they were involved with a group of mga fishermen sa Manila Bay. Ito yung grupo ng Pamalakaya. And they were looking for researchers who would be able to essentially help them explain their side of the story tungkol doon sa nangyayaring at the time kasi mayroong proposal to build a new international airport sa area ng Bulacan. And so many of the local residents, especially the fisher folk, they were focused on, they wanted to know what exactly was going on. And so they called up mga research organizations. They got into contact with AGHAM, and AGHAM then essentially put out feelers doon sa iba't ibang mga researchers. And so nagkaroon ng 3 research group na napasok doon sa program na yun, which was actually an extension activity ng university. So there was us, which through Sir Rick Saturay. So pinitch niya yung idea sa kay Dr. Catane doon sa lab, and we took on the job, which at the time was to characterize the geohazards doon sa area ng Bulacan. Then the second proposal was with Dr. Baleng from CSWCD. Sila yung nagsagawa really essentially sociology. Yung sociology ng mga tao doon, and eventually they came up with what they called a counter EIA, the counter environmental impact assessment. Diba, the standard na EIA is drafted by subject experts, so mostly mga people who work with things like geosciences, risk analysis, mga nasa health, especially public health, ganun. Pero the idea of the counter EIA is you essentially try to yung namang experiences ng community. So the community experiences and yung kanilang ideas about how yung kanilang buhay within the community, yun yung gagamitin na basehan to draft this counter EIA. And the third was with Sir Vico over at the Archaeological Studies program. So they tackled naman yung essentially the history and culture ng fishing dun sa area na yun. Like ano yung history ng fishing doon, paano nag-develop yung fishing culture within the area. So all three of the projects, all three of them are extension projects. All three of them have come out with results, both in terms of the research aspect, but also in terms of the extension aspect. So that's essentially paano kami napadpad from, di ba, landslides. Biglang nahila kami into a study that started off with, yun nga, geohazards doon sa area na yun. And through that, doon naman kami napasok doon sa community experiences, and which became the foundation noong aming naging research na recently na-publish sa Journal ng Ocean and Coastal Management.
Ayun. So, since yung Manila Bay yung pinag-uusapan natin, mag-focus na siguro tayo dun sa sa paper nyo. So, ang title ng paper ay Development in an Environmentally Critical Coastal Area, the Risk Perception on Natural Hazards and the New Manila International Airport by Fishing Communities in Taliptip, Philippines. So as mentioned by Romel, bago lang, this year lang din ito na-publish sa journal na Ocean and Coastal Management. So Romel, can you explain muna what this paper is all about in one sentence? So very brief lang na background kung tungkol saan itong paper na to.
Okay, so at its core, the paper explains how the communities perceive the risks brought about by geohazards and the potential of the construction of the New Manila International Airport in Bulacan that would cause their displacement. So we then compared how they perceive these two risks, and that's essentially the gist of the paper.
Ayun. So siguro hindi na to bago sa mga viewers na itong New Manila International Airport, very very hot topic siya. So siguro before we go into more detail, can you give us an idea bakit naging big deal itong New Manila International Airport? Ano ba yung problema dito?
Okay, so siguro konting background on the NMIA din. So New Manila International Airport is this airport na tinatayo ngayon sa bayan ng Bulacan, sa probinsya ng Bulacan. And this airport is supposed to become the primary international gateway of the Philippines, supplementing the role of the current Manila Ninoy Aquino International Airport. Isa siya sa dalawang competing na developments, the other being Sangley Point International Airport, nagko-compete to become the new international gateway of the Philippines. And kasi if we're talking about yung idea ng airports, we're talking about very large constructions kasi minimum ngayon in order to supplement NAIA, which is currently operating at around 40 plus million passengers a year, minimum requirements na yan ngayon is 2 runways and a massive central terminal complex, which means you need a lot of land. And that is not necessarily in large supply around Manila. Kasi di ba, Manila is a very populous but also very densely built up city. Manila, if you isang definition naman ng metropolitan population, Manila is actually around 23-24 million na katao within Manila and yung kanyang mga suburbs sa Bulacan, Rizal, Cavite, Laguna, and even all the way to Batangas and Pampanga. And within those areas, so you have a lot of built up And most of the areas that are not built up are being used for farming. Both projects, New Manila International at Sangli Point, they decided to work with that land issue in different ways. Sangli Point decided to go with reclamation. Mag-reclaim sila off the coast of Sangli Point, which is Cavite City. And sa kaso ng New Manila International Airport, they decided to basically buy up yung at mga fish pond areas sa north of Manila, sa area nga ng Bulacan, and then develop that into the airport.
So in short, parang pala yung nangyari, since wala nang space na mapagtayuan ng airport, naghanap na lang sila ng ibang paraan para magkaroon ng lupa na pagtayuan ng airport.
Yeah, I don't know kung naalala ng iba to, pero like the early 2010s, the primary idea was at the time was mag-reclaim sa Taguig. Kung ang idea nung gagawa sila ng malaking dike from like Taguig all the way to Los Baños. This was the Laguna Lakeshore Dike, and then they'll reclaim this large swathe ng coastal area ng Taguig, Muntinlupa, and lahat ng mga cities and towns along the western portion of Laguna de Bay, and ilalagay nila yung airport doon. That was the original idea, and then that got shelved dahil masyadong mahal. And so naghanap kayo ng ibang location, and yun yung dalawang project ngayon. So yung isa bumili ng fish farming area sa Bulacan, the other decided to go with reclamation. Ngayon, one of the issues doon sa site ng Bulacan, Taliptip sa Bulacan, is the fact that it is a fish pond area. So, fish pond areas, especially yung area ng Taliptip, they lie at or below sea level. In fact, sa case ng Taliptip, it's actually below sea level. Yung mga fish ponds doon are actually refilled by just opening gates doon sa mga dikes na nakapalibot sa mga dam, doon sa mga fish pond. So, nagbubukas lang sila ng gate at pumapasok yung tubig during high tide. And combine that with yung nasa ilalim. So, yung nasa ilalim ng Barangay Taliptip, ang substrate nun is a combination ng sand and mud sediments na galing sa Sierra Madre. So, sa Sierra Madre, doon nagkakaroon ng erosion doon, and then yung various ng mga ilog, batis, dinadala nila pababa yung mga sediment at tinatambak nila along the shores of Manila Bay. And that's a substrate of sand and mud that is hundreds of meters up to, in some portions, kilometers thick na sand and mud. And the thing about sand and mud is, without constant sediment supply sa isang area na sa isang delta, without constant sediment supply, nagsasubside yan. You have natural subsidence dun sa area na yan, and this is observable din actually within that area. There is active subsidence along the whole northern margin ng Manila Bay. Partially dahil nga doon sa natural compaction ng sediments, partially dahil nagsimula tayong magtatayo ng mga dam along the river. So that means you're now choking off part of the sediment supply. So think of dams like Angat Dam, Pantabangan Dam, and yung maraming mga dam na tinayo ng National Irrigation Authority along the mountain ranges sa Sierra Madre at sa Zambales Range. So lahat ng mga yun, sediment sources mo, they're now cut off. So yung mga ilog mo are delivering less sediment to the region. And a third factor is, I think, one that many of our viewers would be familiar with, subsidence due to groundwater extraction. And That third one is particularly poignant because Bulacan is malapit sa area ng Kamanaba, which I think is yung pinakakilalang case ng subsidence sa Pilipinas, which is aggravated by a lot of groundwater extraction. I mean, there are many things that we could say about dun sa groundwater extraction that, like for example, the fact that it's not as bad as cases in, like for example, sa Tokyo, they may lugar sa Tokyo that sunk like meters ang binagsak niya. Kamanaba has not yet sunk to like over a meter, pero at that, despite the fact it hasn't sunk over a meter, lubog na siya, di ba? Mm-hmm. And this has been known na nangyayari sa Kamanaba since like the 1970s, 1980s. We're already seeing mga senyales ng subsidence doon sa area. I mean, I think it was started being tracked in the 1980s, which is kaya the research doon sa area na yun starts off yung subsidence in the 1980s. Although it might have been subsiding before that, but we don't have the data. Pero ngayon kasi, you're also performing groundwater extraction further north towards yung areas nga towards Bulacan. There's a lot of groundwater extraction going on there as well. So, mga like Malolos, May Kawayan, mga Bocaue, all of these places that especially due to the suburban growth ng Manila northwards into Bulacan, there's a lot of people, a lot of industries, and they need a lot of water, and that water has to come from somewhere. At dahil tap out na ang Angat Dam, sobrang busy na niya sa pagpapadala ng tubig sa both Manila and also providing for irrigation sa mga farmers natin along in eastern Bulacan. So most of these areas procure water from groundwater, and there are signs na nakakaroon ng subsidence dyan. I've seen that several studies that have already shown. They've used radar interferometry to showcase that there's already active subsidence dun sa area. Mm-hmm. So combine those factors, you have a lot of subsidence. So you have a lot of these active subsidence. That means you cannot build your airport at sea level. Kasi if you build your airport at sea level, the moment na below sea level siya, babae ng airport. No more airport.
Paano ngayon nagko-connect yung construction ng New Manila International Airport dun sa buhay ng mga fisher folks?
Ito ngayon yung ating yung mas social na aspect na nung nagawa natin na research. It's essentially the project was conceived by San Miguel Corporation. So, well, technically San Miguel Holdings, and yung kanilang subsidiary, which is yung subsidiary na magtatayo at mag-ooperate. And the thing was that even during the time na parang nag-undergo pa ng parang kapapasa pa lang niya sa NEDA, nagkakaroon ng Swiss Challenge, so ino-offer sa ibang mga investors like, kayo, gusto niyo bang kayong gumawa nito? And if kayo gustong gumawa nito, can you do it for like less money than yung hinihiling ng San Miguel? Even at that time, there were already some issues regarding land acquisition because yung area ng Taliptip was inhabited. There were yung barangay Taliptip itself had 5,000 inhabitants. Pero yung area na specifically pagtatayo ng airport, which is in yung mga yun yung mga coastal areas ng Taliptip. Medyo, hindi siya yung pinaka-populated, but you still had hundreds of people living in the proposed area of the airport. Ngayon, part of the issue was that they did not own the land. Kasi sila...
Yung fisher folks?
Oh, the fisher folk and yung mga trabaho nila, they were fishing, but many of them, sila yung nangangalaga ng mga fish pond, and some of them also mined salt. They were actually salt farming dun sa area. May mga salt farms dun sa area, so they were actually collecting salt. So those were three of the main livelihoods dun sa area. And as is the case with marami sa atin, dinala sila doon sa site from other places within Bulacan, pero many of them trace their ancestry from the Visayas. So sila dinala doon sa area, pinayagan sila noong mga may-ari ng lupa na magtayo ng bahay, in exchange na sila yung magtatrabaho for magtatrabaho doon sa fish pond, magtatrabaho doon sa mga salt farm. And that was the case for decades. Simula yan nung 1950s, 1960s, nagsimula yung ganung sistema dun sa area. And that was the case until noong pinropose yung airport. And once na pinropose yung airport, syempre they were now stakeholders doon sa airport, because they would be the ones directly affected by the land acquisition and the construction of the airport. Sila, in order to build the airport, they had to be transferred over to they have to be relocated and compensated. Yun naman talaga ang state of the art natin when it comes to development projects, like when we're developing a major project, talaga naman ginagawa natin na may compensation packages para doon sa mga affected residents, merong typically relocation sites na tinatayo. But one of the main issues was the fact that there were no concrete plans. Starting from 2017, which is kung kailan nagsimulang kumalat doon sa communities yung balita that may planong magtayo ng airport doon sa Taliptip, there were no concrete plans. Pumatak ng 2018, 2019, 2020, wala pa rin plano. And 2020 was in particular difficult dahil by that time they were starting construction. At least yung preparatory works for construction nagsisimula na noong 2020, and even by then wala pa ring plano for relocation, walang specific na amount for compensation. There was nothing. There was no concrete na plano for them. And then combine that with the pressure. There was pressure being applied to them to leave. So pinapaalis sila na doon sa Taliptip. Yung pagpapaalis sa kanila was quite contentious, because at first yung pagpapaalis, according to the residents, nothing. There was nothing being offered to them. Move away.
Basta alis na kayo, walang compensation. Ganun.
Walang compensation. And part of the reason kung bakit nahihirapan sila was that yung dynamics between the fact that, San Miguel was this big corporation, but it wasn't only San Miguel who was pursuing this. It was also being pursued by the LGU. You had the governor sa Bulacan was very supportive of the project. You had the mayor, and all the way to the barangay. Everyone wanted the project because, of course, kailan mo ba, like, para sa LGU, I mean, you have this chance to become essentially the next Pasay. So for them, this was a no-brainer na susuportahan nila yung project dahil that would be a massive investment doon sa kanilang area. Pero yun nga, for the people who would be most directly affected,
walang plano para sa kanila.
Wala silang plano. If you search yung balita tungkol this, there was mayroon noong October 2020, mayroong news na lumabas na pinagyan ng housing yung ilang mga residents ng Taliptip. So, pinigyan daw ng housing ng San Miguel. Now, the thing about this is that ang binigay na housing was I think housing for 5 to 6 families.
Yun lang kakonti out of ilang
ganong kakonti. You had hundreds of families dun sa area. And yung mga families kasi yun yung natira. Yun yung natira doon sa area after all the pressures na inimpart to make them emigrate from Taliptip.
So may mga umalis na pala dahil sa pressure, and then yung inoferan lang ng compensation yung natira.
Is yung 5-6 na pamilyang natira doon sa area. So yung mga yun, sila pa yung swerte. Kumbaga sila, they stayed there the longest. Whilst pinapanood nila essentially mga communities nila unti-unting lumiliit dahil nakikita nila isa-isa mga nagsisialisan yung mga kapitbahay nila, mga kamag-anak nila, unti-unting mga nagsisialisan, at natira na lang silang 5-6 na pamilya. Then and only then nagkaroon ng pabahay. And that actually goes back dun sa ng paper, which is that one of the big risks na tinitingnan parati ng mga communities at the time was socio-economic risk. Saan kami magtatrabaho? Saan kami kukuha ng bahay? Saan kami kukuha ng pagpapatay ng panibagong bahay? Saan kami magtatrabaho? And then, these are mga communities that were not accessible by road, it's all by boat. So, there were issues that marami sa kanila they did not even finish basic education. Karami ng mga matatanda did not finish elementary. Yung mga anak nila ang typically nakakatapos ng elementary up to high school. So, for a lot of them, they were also thinking, anong trabaho namin kung umalis kami? Yun yung mga risks na tinitingnan nila, which is part of the reason bakit sila nakatira doon in the first place. Kasi, I mean, in terms kasi ng geohazards doon sa area, aaminin naman natin, it was dangerous na tumira doon. You had risk predominantly from storm surges and flooding from rainfall. But the thing about yung mga ganong natural hazards was they occur annually. They are, diba, napaghahandaan at may certain intensity, may certain taas ng alon, taas ng baha, and people find ways to mitigate that. That's why, diba, a lot of Filipino communities are resilient, specifically because they find ways to live in spite of the hazards of geohazards. So for them, they did not see the storm surges, the flooding as they saw them as manageable problems na mahanapan mo ng paraan. Kapag may parating na bagyo, okay, evacuate muna yung mga babae, yung mga matatanda, yung mga bata, evacuate muna sa mainland. Yung mga lalaki ang mananatili. And even there, that already indicates in a way kung ano yung mas inaalala nila. Mas inaalala nila is yung socio-economic risk. Paano kung manakawan yung bahay namin? Paano kung masira yung bahay namin? Since nangyayari to every year, like during the height ng habagat season, like nangyayari every month nangyayari na nag-evacuate sila. Even then, dahil nga nakakapag-evacuate sila na mitigate nila yung risk na yon, so mas nakafocus sila doon sa risk na pakiramdam nila yung may hirapan sila ma-mitigate, which is yun ngang socio-economic risk na maaari silang mawalan ng property, maaari silang mawalan ng kabuhayan. And the thing is, this is not isolated lamang sa kaso ng mga mangingisda sa Taliptip. This is the case pretty much everywhere that we have geohazards. Like for example, yung mga farmers sa paanan ng Mayon. For example, kapag nag-raise ng alert level 3, alert level 4 sa paanan ng Mayon, ang umaalis are mostly mga babae, matatanda, bata. Yung mga lalaki naiiwan, nagbabantay ng bahay. So it's this exact same thing going on. Pumunta ka sa mga lugar ng sa Cordillera, yung mga areas na maraming landslide. Kapag umuulan, marami sa kanila hindi naman umaalis sa bahay. They'd rather stay there than go to the evacuation centers. Because for them, mas malaking risk sa kanila na mawalan ng gamit, mawalan ng bahay, rather than yung magkaroon na sila ay maapektuhan ng landslide. So, as part of it, yun yung natututunan mo once that you're talking with them and you're also looking at how yung ganong sitwasyon, not only here in the Philippines, but also in other countries, that this is a constant tension that people perceive risks according dun sa kanilang location, according dun sa kanilang station, na parati nila binabalansa yung mga factors na yan. Alam nila na mapanganib ang baha. Alam nila mapanganib ang bagyo. And that's why mayroon silang pamamaraan na i-mitigate yun. So, marami sa kanila hindi naman opposed to evacuation. Pero once na dumating pero even despite the fact na alam na mapanganib na yun, may iba silang inaalala. And yun, kaya may mga natitira doon na nakatira sa bahay, even during the height ng storms. And that is also part of kung bakit marami sa kanila originally ang ayaw umalis doon sa area. Because for all of the geohazards that occurs doon sa Taliptip, socio-economically, they feel that okay yung buhay nila doon. Ang parating nga nilang kataga ay madaling mangisda. Para sa kanila, madaling mangisda, yun yung buhay na alam nila, and therefore, ba't sila aalis? Ang mabigat sa kanila yung nangyaring depopulation nung area noong 2020. Dahil di ba, we know what happened in early 2020, the start ng COVID-19 pandemic. That was one of the major factors na nakaapekto sa kanila. Kasi di ba, during the pandemic, pahirapan na maglako ng kanilang mga isda, ng kanilang mga shellfish na binibenta. Hindi ganun kadaling magbenta ng kanilang mga produkto And therefore, ngayon, yung kanilang kabuhayan na, which is one of the main reasons kung bakit sila nag-i-stay doon, it was affected na. Hindi na siya kasing steady as before. And then combine that with increasing pressures dahil especially by around 2020 tumatakbo na yung proseso ng pag-approve doon sa construction noong airport. And so there were increasing pressures din doon sa ibang mga stakeholders sina San Miguel, yung LGU. There's increasing pressure on them to start preparing for doon sa construction ng airport. And so it reached to the point wherein nagkaroon ng moratorium noong mga May to June 2020 that pinagbabawal muna na national government ang pagde-demolish ng mga bahay. Pero ang inano ng LGU was self-demolish nyo yung mga bahay nyo. And for many of them, at that time, they felt that they had no choice. And they did self-demolish. They emigrated. Umalis sila mula doon sa kanilang mga tinitirhan na lugar sa Taliktik. Kaya from the tens to hundreds of families na nandun sa area, it na-whittle down yung population to 6 by October 2020, which is kung kailan the last 5 to 6 families nagkaroon ng chance na magkaroon ng pabahay at na binayaran ng San Miguel.
So ngayon wala nang nakatira doon na family.
Ngayon wala na. Sa nakita ko from satellite imagery, sinisimulan na nila yung construction ng mga runway. Tapos na yung kasi there were several phases dyan. The very first phase, which is ito yung ginagawa nila to mitigate yung problema ng subsidence, is essentially tatambak ng lupa. When you're doing these sorts of pagtatambak, you always use sand. So they were dredging sand from off the coast ng Cavite. And this is admittedly a part na medyo hindi namin na-discuss masyado sa paper, partially dahil hindi kami as familiar with ano nangyayari doon. Yung sa area ng Rosario, Cavite in particular. There are several dredging ships off the coast ng Cavite, and all they're doing is mining the sand underneath ng under the water, and then dinadala nila doon sa Taliptip essentially nagre-reclaim sila doon sa area by dumping meters upon meters ng sand para essentially both ma-compress yung lupa sa ilalim but also provide a nice substrate kung saan pwede sila magtayo ng airport. Kasi the other thing about sand and mud is that given the choice, you always want to build a structure atop sandy sediments rather than muddy sediments. Dahil simply, once you start building on top of mud, napakahirap i-mitigate. Marami sa mga properties ng mud, like, for example, at moments ang mud mo nagiging putik. Which is, kapag ang pundasyon mo is built atop essentially a liquid, you never want na magtayo ka ng kahit especially infrastructure at that scale on top of mud. So you always find ways to, how do we make sure that we build on top of sand or if better yet, rock. Pero dahil doon sa location, their choice was really only sand or mud. The bedrock is very deep and hindi kahit may piles ka pa, hindi mo mararating siya. So they essentially had to dump a lot of sand in order para mapataas yung height noong area to the point that they feel like subsidence would be mitigated. Pero even then, part of the problem with yung nagsasagawa ka ng mga ganyang reclamation is, yung mga ganyang reclamation, especially yung mga ganyan, nagtatambak ka ng maraming sand sa isang area that has a lot of sand and mud substrate, is you could predict to a degree kung ano yung level ng subsidence, pero sometimes even the best predictions are there are things that we didn't know, and this is particularly notable sa kaso ng Kansai Airport sa Osaka, which was the first attempt to build like an entire artificial island. Noong
Hindi ako familiar dun.
Essentially at the time, same issues actually natin sa Maynila. So they had an airport na napapalibutan na ng syudad, and they needed a bigger airport, especially because ang naging problema sa Japan was yung airport sa Tokyo, na they had two airports sa Tokyo, yung lumang airport at yung bagong airport. Yung bagong airport sa Tokyo, which was Tokyo Narita, hindi nila ma-expand dahil sa protesta ng mga farmers. So that's an entire thing. Kung gusto niyo pag-aralan, it's called the Sanrizuka struggle, and it's a very famous case about yung issues ng development and really a lot of miscommunication by the Japanese government. And so after nung debacle na yun, nag-decide ang Japanese government, hindi na kami magtatayo on land. So we will build on top of water. So we'll reclaim. Ang naging problema naman sa Kansai, nung nireclaim nila, and they were doing this with the state-of-the-art at the time. They were doing this with the best geotechnical engineering that was available at the time. Turns out na mayroong mga bagay na hindi pa tayo alam tungkol sa subsidence sa sand, sa muddy terrain. And kaya ngayon, yung airport which they expected to be na magsasubside down to sea level in several decades pa, they were expecting that magkakaroon lang ng issues regarding sa subsidence by around the 2040s, 2050s. To give an idea, the airport was being constructed in the 1980s, and then so they were expecting that they will have to mitigate it around mga 2040, 2050. Pero the problem was by the 2000s, nag-subside na. Nagsusubside na, and by 2010s, parts of the airport complex were already they were already only like a meter or two above sea level. So napipilitan actually silang isa rin airport during the time sa may bagyo because may inundate yung runway. Yun din yung isa sa magiging issues din sa New Manila International Airport, which is being built on similar types ng material. It's also being built on top of thick layers ng sand and mud. Para dun sa airport, you hope that yung mga nagko-construct sa kanya, which is San Miguel alongside with all of their stakeholders, hopefully they do their due diligence on that aspect na they build this airport knowing yung issues na yon. Kasi if they did not mitigate that, then you're looking at really what could be a white elephant project ultimately. Pero syempre, that's only with the airport itself. Ngayon, ano epekto niya dun sa surrounding area? There's a lot of things na makaka-apekto dun sa surrounding area. Like, for example, how do you get to the airport? So you have to get to the airport, magtatayo ka ng transportation infrastructure. That would be roads, that would be trains, that would be mga, like any way of transporting people, fuel, cargo, lahat yun itatransport po doon sa airport. So, which is, kaya actually right now, alam ko is may tinatayo ngayong panibagong expressway just to link the New Manila International Airport to the expressway network ng Metro Manila. Which is, kung para dun sa mga listeners natin na nagta-travel panorte along NLEX, meron dong panibagong construction just beyond Balintawak Toll Plaza na parang papunta siya if you're traveling northward, it's heading west papunta sa direction ng Navotas, Malabon. That's actually that's a new expressway called the Northern Link. Northern Access Link Expressway. At tinatayo at least yung phase 1 niya, yun ang i-connecta sa airport. And that's another thing. So you're building a lot of infrastructure to serve the airport. Pero it would also strain the local infrastructure that's available. Kasi syempre, madaming tao sa airport. Madaming taong pumunta sa airport para magtrabaho, maraming pumunta para mag-travel. Which means traffic. Di ba, ang lala ng traffics around NAIA, around like from sa Nichols, sa Sales Road, sa Nichols, sa Mia Road, lahat yung mga areas na yun is sa sobrang dami ng mga sasakyan, they built an entire new expressway, which is the NAIA Expressway, just to potentially mitigate yung para essentially mag-increase ng capacity ng roadways around NAIA. And even then, traffic pa rin doon sa mga lumang daan sa ilalim. It's bumper to bumper traffic pa rin. And even the NAIA Expressway itself is madami and that's despite the fact ang dami nang dumadaan sa NAIA Expressway. Yung mga roads there are very wide. They're like 6-lane roads, 8-lane roads. Sa area ng Bulacan, the widest is a 4-lane road, which is yung national highway nila from Obando to Pamalolos. And 4-lane road, and at portions it's just a 2-lane road. So you'll have to expand that. So that's additional construction, but also yung dami na magiging emissions. Yung dami kang magiging emissions dun sa area. The second issue, noise. Maingay ang isang airport. Maingay din yung traffic papunta sa airport. Kasi hindi siya pinapractice dito sa masyado sa Pilipinas, pero in several other countries, there are times na kung saan nire-require ng mga local, if not national governments, yung operator ng airport na mag-install ng soundproofing sa mga bahay ng mga tao along the flight path ng mga airports. Hindi natin siya ginagawa dito sa Philippines, pero this is partially in a way dahil sa ating level of development, it's also very expensive. Dahil ang dami mong gagawan yan. Like, even just thinking, di ba, sa NAIA, like, gaano kadami yung currently na apektuhan noong ingay mula doon sa mga eroplanong umaakit, bumababa. And, partially sa atin, parang, kasanayan na natin Kasanayan na natin na ganun. Pero doon sa area na yon, like, how many doon sa mga nakatira sa Bulacan are prepared na constantly maingay? Like, every minute, every few minutes, biglang may napakaingay na may mga landing na aeroplano, yung mga lalo na yung mga nagte-take off the airplane, napaka-iingay dahil that's the moment na full power yung kanilang mga engine. Kasi if they're not at full power, hindi sila maka-take off. So full power also means like the maximum amount of noise na pwede nilang i-emit. And you'll have potentially millions ng katao affected along dun sa potential flight path. Those are just some of the things na you ideally want to think of when you're performing a development like this, a development of this scale, and you want to balance that with the economic benefits. Is the amount of these issues na may incur, these externalities kung tawagin sa parlance ng sa development, are these externalities mitigated by the potential economic benefits ng airport? Yun yung dapat na calculus na pumapasok doon sa pag-iisip ng ating government officials, ng ating mga stakeholders, and even the general public itself.
Curious pala ako dito. Since, ayun nga, na-bring up mo yung mga issues. And then, since yung publication ng paper na to, nagkaroon ba siya ng any kind of effect sa development ng New Manila International Airport?
Kasi for one thing, this research is actually yung paper was the second result nung research namin. The first was a report it was just an internal report na ginawang basehan na there were a few journalists who were able to read the report and then pinublish nila yon alongside with yung kanilang mga interviews with the community, yung mga communities within Taliptip. And we know for a fact that there has been interactions, that ito is aware yung at mga stakeholders. In fact, some of the members nung AGHAM, which was yung aming partner institutions, were part ng mga naging resource persons nung dinidiscuss yung franchise niya sa Senate. Although ultimately ang nangyari is nag-pursue yung project. Essentially they believed that the economic benefits outweighed many of the externalities, and this was despite protests that ginagawa at the time. This was despite the work that's been done. Now, of course, that is not to say that the people who are constructing the airport have not thought of these. Meron din sila mga ginagawang mga mitigation measures. Very notably, parating inaano ng San Miguel that they're actually performing dredging doon sa mga river systems sa Bulacan to mitigate the flood risk. Ngayon, the effectivity of that scheme is, I would argue, a bit questionable. Pero is a bit questionable, I think, yung if you're just dredging the waterways, the waterways are relatively small kumpara doon sa amount ng water na nahuhulog during a flood event doon sa area. So you could make argument maybe it's not that effective. Pero kumbaga, that is just an example to say that the company is aware na mayroong mga ganitong issues. Maybe they focus on these issues, pero yun nga, one of the issues that they did not focus on as much, and some would even argue that they did not pay attention at all, was this social component, yung mga nakatira doon sa area na in a way para na pag-iwanan ng development. Because a lot of them aware of, some of them have actually moved back to the provinces, like lalo sa Visayas. Some of them, others is nakikitira doon sa mga kamag-anak nila in like other parts ng Bulacan. Some of them nag-migrate pa yata to Metro Manila. So in a way, that's several communities na the community is essentially gone now. It's undergone what's for all intents and purposes a diaspora. Na nakakalat na lang sila, and many of them are looking at an uncertain future dahil nga they were not compensated for what they've experienced, for essentially the fact that they lost their homes, their communities. For many of them, they lost their livelihood. There were like ilang taon na pinagbawal mangisda off the coast off the coast ng Taliptip, and from part of it is actually a safety component because di ba yung mga barko na galing sa Cavite na naghuhukay ng sand, these are large, malalaki silang mga barges. And when you have a case ng mga malalaking barges and mga maliliit na bangkang pangisda, kung magkaroon ng banggaan, that would of course be that would be a major safety hazard. So naging solution doon nung subcontractor ng San Miguel na siya nagsasagawa nung reclamation aspect was essentially just to ask the local governments to ban fishing along the entire area. So how many other people, hindi lang yung mga nakatira doon sa Taliptip na displaced, how many other people doon sa area were affected by this fishing ban? There are hundreds if not thousands more na apektuhan. And this also occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic. So itong mga ito, they lost access to their livelihood during a time when could argue they needed that livelihood more than in almost any other time in recent history, dahil that was during COVID-19, pahirapan na maraming natenga sa trabaho, maraming napilitan tumigil sa pagtatrabaho, and for these people who in theory these people would not have been affected sa ibang areas is nakakapangisda lang sila just fine, pero doon sa area ng Bulacan, a lot of the fisher folk, they had to stop fishing. Dahil nga banned sila mag-fish, and so marami sa kanila napilit maghanap anong pa bang mga ibang trabaho pwede nang pasukan. And that, the after effects of that I don't know if ever fully natin makikita yung after effects noong mga events na yun.
Ayun, so very insightful discussion from Sir Romel, and I think kailangan na rin natin mag-wrap up more than
we're more than 1 hour.
More than 1 hour na tayo.
Uh-huh.
And I think for me, yung takeaway ko dito sa lahat ng na-discuss nyo is yung pinakamalaking problema talaga dito ay yung pag-handle nila dun sa socio-economic na aspect. Kasi parang hindi nila yon na take into account dun sa development nila.
They did not probably put the importance that they probably should have doon sa socio-economic aspect ng project. Mas nag-focus sila doon sa economic lang na aspect for, in a way, the larger community. Mas doon sila nag-focus. May mga naiwan tayo.
Ano po yung plans moving forward with this study?
ang nakikita ko kasi continuation na this research is you look at that effect, that socio-economic effect. Ano yung naging effects nito doon sa mga communities na yun. And that's really just too far away from ating dun sa home field natin, the geosciences. That's at that point, that's the domain na na mga nag-aaral ng developmental economics, developmental sociology. It's there are pwedeng i-continue siya, pero I don't think that it's
Hindi
us
siya
that
sa
would continue.
geosciences.
It's really just too far. Even this research, it's part of the reason why it took so long. Dahil diba, our fieldwork occurred in 2019, 2020. A good amount of the period of time between noong fieldwork namin and yung pag-publish of papers, really learning a lot about really sociological concepts, yung mga concepts regarding risk. These are parts na hindi naman part ng ating training sa geosciences. Pero in a way, that created for what we believe is a very interesting research with this multidisciplinary aspect to it. That hindi lang siya geosciences. We're talking, development. So in socioeconomics, we're talking yung mga relationships sa pagitan ng iba't ibang stakeholders. Which is yung once nakikita mo, because geosciences and really the sciences in general, it's only one part of this complex network that's essentially yung ating mundo, yung ating buhay. And all of these aspects they're all interconnected. They all have interplays. The fact that nagsimula kami, di ba, sa geosciences, tapat-pat na dito sa development, that in itself already tells you that how there's this interplay that sometimes minsan hindi natin na papasok as geoscientists or even other people who are involved in the natural sciences, especially mga fields like mathematics, physics. It is a criticism sa atin ng mga people especially within the social sciences. It's a criticism that yung ating mga inaaral in some ways is masyadong esoteric, masyadong abstract. That sometimes, dahil sobrang abstracted, we sometimes forget to look at it that these places, the places, the landscapes, we have people that live there. And these people, they have their own stories to tell. medyo pumapasok tayo sa soksay aspect. They have stories to tell. They have networks of interactions and relationships, and in a way, I would like for us na scientists, we would like to keep that in mind. Lalo na tayo sa mga natural and physical sciences, that there is this other parts pa ng ating mga pinag-aaralan that we sometimes don't see. Maaaring hindi tayo yung equipped to fully understand kung ano yun. Like, hindi tayo equipped maintindihan paano nag-develop yung kultura, paano nag-develop yung pagkatira nila. It's at the very least, it's something that we should always keep in mind when we're doing research in these locations, when we're doing fieldworks, especially dahil kapag nakakasalamuhan natin itong mga tao na ito.
Dito na lang muna tayo. Medyo marami-rami na yung na-discuss natin tungkol sa mga issues nga dito sa yung Manila International Airport. And I hope yung mga audience natin, madami rin silang natutunan na topics, hindi lang yung geohazards, kundi pati na rin yung interconnectedness ng mga iba't ibang fields of sciences. Ayun. So maraming salamat Sir Romel at maraming salamat sa lahat ng nakikinig. See you everyone sa ating next episode.
Bye everyone. Have a good day. See you next time.